Dr. Thomas, you're able to let people in as needed, right?
That's
And everyone, I'm Dr. Ted Cooper. I'm an associate professor here in the Department of Psychology. I'm in both the health and clinical master's concentrations, and we'll talk more about those things. But we wanted to, in this semi-virtual environment these days, provide an information session for folks who are thinking about UTEP Psychology for graduate training. So we have faculty representatives from each area of our doctoral program and from our clinical master's program, as well as some current students on hand to tell you about their experience at UTEP. And all of us will be able to answer some questions at the end of the information session. Because we want to extend this Zoom meeting to as many people as would like to see it, I hope you're all okay with our recording this session, which we started to do, so hopefully you are. And we'll continue to let people in who join us. Welcome to all of you. Thanks for dropping those things in the chat. We're glad to see folks from here in El Paso in the border region, as well as from afar. Without further ado, I'm going to ask that Dr. Seraphine, who serves as our graduate program director, to start by just introducing you to graduate training at UTEP Psychology.
Sure. Hi, welcome everyone. I want to echo what Dr. Cooper said, which is that we're very excited that you're here. We're happy to give you any information you might be wondering about our graduate programs. So I'll give a very brief overview of the programs in general. A lot of this information is probably on the website, but it's mostly just for way of introducing the programs to all of you. So we have master's programs and doctoral programs in psychology. Our doctoral programs, we have 5 different areas of concentration, and those are health psychology, legal psychology, social and cultural psychology, bilingualism, language, and cognition, which is 1 concentration, even though it sounds like 3. And then we have behavioral neuroscience as well. We have 2 master's programs. One of them is a clinical master's in psychology, and the other one is an experimental master's program. I do want to note, and this is something you might not be able to tell from the website, that we don't often have students that apply directly for our experimental master's program, but rather that is sort of a stepping stone that many students get on their way to the PhD in one of our other concentration areas. So there are some commonalities across all of our programs that I want to talk about first. The first one is really rigorous statistical training. So across all master's and doctoral programs, students get hands-on really good applied experience with statistics. So that's something that you can definitely expect at UTEP for all of our programs. These are also very research-focused programs. UTEP is an R1 research university. What that means is that we focus on research, we provide high-quality research, cutting-edge research, interdisciplinary research to our region, but also across many different fields. And so research is going to be a heavy component, even for the clinical master's program, which does have obviously clinical training involved as well. So what you can expect if you're a student in our doctoral program is to do really sort of 3 main research projects that are guided by your mentor, starting with a first-year project. The goal of this is to get you in the lab as soon as possible, as soon as you come into our program. So that first-year project obviously takes place during your first year. You'll present it to the department in your second year. After that, you start working on your thesis. Oftentimes, students will build their thesis project off of the first-year project. And then there's also a dissertation, obviously. And so this is something that's traditional for psychology graduate programs, maybe not so much for neuroscience programs if you're someone who's looking at multiple programs across the country. But psychology does usually require a master's degree on the way to the PhD. There's also an opportunity for all of our programs for students to focus on quantitative statistics a little bit more heavily through an optional certificate program. That's not something you have to do, but it is something that a lot of our students choose to do because it provides you a little bit more training in statistics, which is, of course, really desirable for the job market, depending on which type of career field you're planning on going to. And then the last sort of major commonality across all areas is the opportunity to gain training in both breadth of psychology as a field, but depth in your specific area of focus. So that might look a little bit different depending on which concentration you're interested in. What counts as breadth versus depth depends on what your specific career goals are. And so there's a lot of opportunity to sort of tailor our program to the individual. So if you're someone who wants to go into neuroscience, but you also have a lot of cognitive psychology interests, there are courses and ways that we can make the program work to fit that specific goal. So I'll just quickly go over some of the application requirements. We have a deadline of December 1st. And the GRE is currently required for our program. However, also something you can't quite tell from our website, if you had any type of financial or medical hardship over the last, hectic year with the pandemic, please do reach out to me to talk to me about the possibility of a GRE waiver. That is something that can be done. It requires a little bit of paperwork and some communication between me and you, but please do feel free to contact me directly, and I'll ask Dr. Thomas to put my email into the chat. What do we look for in our applications? We're looking for things like your letters of reference, your personal statement, your research experience. So having research experience is something that is definitely going to look great for your application. Having letter writers who can speak about your research activity in the past would also be fantastic. We strongly encourage you in your personal statement to identify potential mentors that you might want to work with. That's another really great way for us to determine things like fit in our program. We also encourage you to reach out to specific faculty ahead of applying. If there's someone you already know you're excited about potentially working with, reach out to them, send them an email. We love to hear from you. And that's a great way to find out, again, fit in terms of whether or not our program is the right one for you, and vice versa. So since there are some folks not from the local region, I also just want to briefly mention some cool things about the El Paso area. As I said, UTEP in general is a very research-focused university, and so there are some opportunities to interact with other departments, other disciplines at UTEP if you're in our program. We also have a lot of community engagement, and that's true really across all of the disciplines and all of the different concentrations in our program. El Paso has over 300 sunny days a year, so it is a bright and happy and warm community. Desert climate, so if you like dry heat, this is the place for sure. And El Paso as a community consistently ranks as one of the top safest cities in the United States. So it's a really safe place to do your graduate training. It's a really warm place to do your graduate training. Snow is very infrequent. So if you're someone who does not like the snow, El Paso is a great place for you. It's also a cultural hotspot, and that's because El Paso is located right at the border of the United States and Mexico. There's a lot of exchange culturally, but also friendships and many other things that you can gain from being in a border city. And in general, I would say that the El Paso community is probably one of the kindest communities you could move to. It's a great place to be. Everyone is very friendly. They're happy to help. That's true in the community. It's true at UTEP. So with that, I'll stop talking and turn it back over to Dr. Cooper, and I'll talk to you more when we get to the neuroscience section.
Thanks so much, Dr. Serafine. That was really succinct and complete and full. But I am now going to let everyone know we're going to talk about each of the doctoral concentrations or foci and then the clinical master's focus. And to start us off, so we don't have to introduce anyone new just yet, is going to be Dr. Serafine talking about the behavioral neuroscience concentration.
Sure, I don't get any breaks. That's fine.
Right.
So in the behavioral neuroscience area, we have 3 main faculty in psychology, but we also have an individual from pharmacy who also mentors students in our program as well. So there's really 4 different mentors to choose from. You can read all about each individual on our website, and so I won't speak for those individuals other than to say that we all are really interested in motivated behavior generally. So we all tend to focus on behavior related to motivation. That might be motivation for drugs, motivation for food, motivation for sexual behavior, and that sort of thing. We are also all interested in pharmacology generally. Many of us study drugs of abuse ranging from different types of drugs. And so that's another commonality that you can find among the neuroscience faculty. We work closely with faculty in the biological sciences department as well as in the School of Pharmacy. So there's a lot of interdisciplinary collaboration that happens within the neuroscience area. And I think that's probably it in a nutshell. It's a great area. Obviously, I'm biased because it's the area that I'm in, but we all have great research happening in all the areas, so you can't really lose.
Very much appreciate that, Dr. Seraphine. And next up to discuss the bilingualism, language, and cognition area, as Dr. Seraphine said, all one area, just a long title, longer, is Dr. Chris Potter.
Is it too complicated if I share my screen?
No, go for it if you'd like.
All right. So yeah, because there's a lot of information here, I figured I would let you see who we're talking about. And the bilingual language and cognition area group, the name kind of spells out what we do. We study many different topics, including language, memory, attention, development. And something I think is really unusual is to have this many faculty members that are working really closely together on related topics and have the specialization for bilingualism in particular. And on top of that, to actually be able to say that we study human behavior and thinking across the entire lifespan from infancy to late adulthood. So we have 5 faculty members in this area, and everybody is potentially looking at new students. So if you are interested in working with someone in particular, I really encourage you to reach out to that faculty member. And I think we're an example of an area group that really benefits from our relocation because bilinguals here probably outnumber monolinguals. And so what I want to do is just briefly mention what each lab does so that you can get a better sense. So if you're interested in memory and how it might be different to remember things, for example, in English versus Spanish, you really should check out the Bilingual Cognition Lab, which is directed by Dr. Francis, who's also the chair of our department. And in that lab, they really focus on the organization of human memory, how memories are represented, and how memories may or may not be different for bilingual stronger versus weaker language. You'll start to see some related themes. And if you're interested in thinking about how your knowledge of words might be different in different languages, Dr. Anna Schwartz directs the Probar lab. And her lab and their research really focuses on how people read in different languages when they're skilled readers and how children might get started reading. And they often use things like eye tracking methods to see how people process different types of information. If instead of being interested in comprehension, you're more interested in how people speak and interact, you should talk to Dr. Eva Ivanova, who she's on this call. And she does work in the language and communication lab. And that lab studies how people's choices in what they say might be influenced by the people they're talking to, and how bilinguals do and don't keep their languages separate. If your interests are a little less directly language and more cognition, you should consider Dr. Ashley Bangert's lab, the Cognition and Aging Lab, where they study attention, event cognition, and the effects of either normal or pathological aging. And she explores relationships between timing and action and cognition in both young adults and the elderly. And then on the other side of the developmental spectrum, in my lab, the Children's Learning Project, we study how people of all different ages and experience learn language. We work with infants and families from a variety of backgrounds, as well as people who may be learning and using a second language, either as children or as adults. And we try to understand how experiences affect the way that people learn. And something else that I want to mention is, just like Dr. Seraphine said, we have a lot of connections both in the community and across campus. And there's a whole consortium of bilingual learning and a lot of opportunities to work with people, for example, in speech language, or in linguistics, or even in education.
Thank you so much, Dr. Potter. That was a great slide. I mean, I don't have one, and so now I'm feeling inferior, but I loved it. It was great. It was very helpful. And again, super quick as we want to make sure we have time for questions. So that's great. Next up, let me introduce Dr. Volpert Esmond, who's going to talk about the social cultural program.
I also prepared slides mostly because it helps keep me on topic and concise. So I'll talk about the cultural area We're a little bit of a smaller area. I think we're the smallest area in the department. We currently have 2.5 faculty members. So that's me, Dr. Wolfer Esmond, Dr. Michael Zarate, and Dr. Osvaldo Morera, who also spends time, he splits his time between us and the health area. We have 7 current graduate students. And one thing that I want to highlight about our area is that we really encourage collaboration between our students within each lab, but even across labs. And so, you know, I work with some of Dr. Zarate's students, and Dr. Morera's students work with other people, and that kind of thing. So we really encourage collaboration, especially because our areas of research interest overlap quite a bit in the social and cultural area. A quick overview of all of our kind of research interests. So I direct the Race, Ethnicity, Neuroscience, and Health Lab. And I have 2 kind of main areas of research, 2 lines of research. One thing I'm interested in is how racial and ethnic discrimination contributes to health outcomes. I've looked at things like mental health, cardiovascular health, and an area that I'm interested in kind of developing more in is looking at how discrimination affects sleep and sleep health outcomes. And the second line of research is focused on neural processes that are involved in person perception. So things like, how do you tell when you look at somebody or when you meet somebody for the first time, how do you tell what race or gender they are? And I use things like EEG and ERPs to measure those electrical brain activity processes that are involved. Dr. Zarate's lab is the social cognition lab. He focuses on social and cognitive processes that underlie person and group perception, and specifically how they're relevant for prejudice and stereotyping. So you can see that there's a lot of overlap between our labs. Currently, he's looking at or interested in how memory consolidation is involved in integrating new social information with long-term memory structures. So things like stereotypes, how do we update our stereotypes when we get new information about people? And also how societal and cultural shifts and gender negative psychological reactions. So things like demographic shifts, you know, how is the population in the US changing, and how does that affect especially white people's attitudes about prejudice, attitudes about immigration, and that kind of thing. So he uses the framework of cultural inertia to look at that. And then Dr. Morera heads the judgment and decision-making lab. He's a trained quantitative psychologist. So this feeds into what Dr. Serafine was saying about having strong quantitative and statistical expertise in this department, which you as a graduate student would also then benefit from. He focuses on behavioral decision theory in medical decision-making, health psychology, and also applied psychometrics. And so 2 kind of areas that he's worked on includes developing decision aids to improve patients' decisions about their healthcare, and also developing interventions that promote behavior change. I think, yeah, so I'll leave it there.
A great overview, a great slideshow. I appreciate it. Next up to talk about our legal psychology concentration is Dr. Reed.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to see you. I recognize a lot of names of students and potential applicants, so it's great to have you here. I'm Christia Reed. I don't have great slides like the other 2 areas either, so I'll just tell you a little bit about legal. We are an area that combines other areas of psychology and applies it specifically to the law. So my research focuses on social psychology and a little bit of cognitive psychology, and looks at legal decision-making and how people make legal decisions. I've done a lot of research with jury decision-making in particular, and more recently, I'm focusing on policy decision-making, so how people make policy decisions, and plea bargain decisions, so what influences people's plea bargain and whether or not they accept it. And then I'm been collaborating a little bit with people in the community. So we work with my lab, and other labs have worked with the probation office in town to help improve these decisions and help improve the way that the system works. I'm working currently with an immigration clinic to help understand those decisions that are being made. And I'm also working with a person on campus that does artificial intelligence, looking at the role of artificial intelligence in legal decisions. So there is a lot of collaboration. I have collaborations going on with social psychology in the social and cultural area, and then also the bilingualism area, because I'm looking at the role of language in plea bargaining. So one of the great things about UTEP is this ability to work with other people. And that's actually one of the benefits of the legal area, is that one of our requirements for graduation is that you're able to work with other people. So you have to work with some other mentor for at least a semester or two, which gives you the experience of working with a variety of people and understanding a variety of ways of doing research. So that's about my research. I'm the only one currently accepting students. Like I said, my overlap is social and a little bit of cognitive primarily. We also have some really great other researchers in the legal area. Dr. April Thomas, who's also on this call and is helping with all of the tech stuff behind the scenes. Thank you, April. Is developmental and does a lot of stuff with the justice system, the juvenile justice system, and has been doing amazing work there and has a major NSF grant looking at that, and it's really exciting. And then we have Dr. Jennifer Eno-Ladden, who couldn't make it today, but she does more of the mental health. So she's more clinical and looks at decisions in jails and other things like that, and is currently working on a major funded project looking at risk assessment tools. So we have a bunch of people, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions that you have.
Thank you, Christia. Thank you, Dr. Reed. Oh, I'm trying to be all proper here. Next up, I'll talk briefly about our health concentration, which is comprised presently of 4 faculty, myself, Dr. Field, who's on the call, who share a little bit more about our clinical master's program, Dr. Moreira, who you already, thanks to Dr. Volpert Esmond, heard about as a quantitative psychologist interested in judgment and decision making, and Dr. Larry Cohn, who studies personality development, adolescent risk-taking behaviors, injury prevention. And so our health area, between the 4 of us, covers health psychology from both more of a clinical perspective as well as a public health perspective. So many of us focus on individual or small group behavior change, and as well as kind of more community-based or population-based interventions. And I think my focus is on addictive behaviors, and we've been doing a little bit more on issues regarding vaping and social media use, excessive social media use and social media addiction. I've also had the joy of working within the community on multiple of our issues. So we're connected, I think all of us, to many of the medical centers and other community organizations, and currently working on some messaging around the pandemic, vaccine hesitancy, as well as diabetes prevention. And this allows me to introduce Dr. Field, who's part of the health area as well, who can share some of his own research interests and overlap with the health area, but also the clinical master's program.
Sure. So to begin with, I'll be presenting the clinical master's degree program. I would like to clarify that, like the experimental master's degree, this is a master's degree that students get along the way to their PhD. That's typically health psychology PhD students, but it can also be the social psychology students. We've had a number of them who have pursued the master's degree in clinical in lieu of experimental because of the connection to the research that they're doing. If you've been to the website, you may have noticed that we sort of have 3 programs, but we do have a core clinical MA program, which, as Dr. Serafine mentioned, is research driven, but clinically oriented. We do also provide roadmaps for what it is, the coursework that you need to complete in order to successfully sit for the licensed professional counselor and the licensed psychological associate. Those do require additional courses. Those courses are required by the licensing agency, and we provide that roadmap. I would say more often than not, Our program is often used as a stepping stone towards a PhD, not just for students who are earning their PhD, but students enter the clinical MA program to bolster their research experience and to be more competitive for PhD programs. But I do want to emphasize that it's research oriented, and in relationship to that, an important thing to emphasize if you're going to apply to the program is a faculty match with your research interests. So what are your research interests? Which faculty would you be interested in working with, and why? And I might even encourage you to reach out to those faculty. The most likely candidates are Dr. Cooper and I, but also Dr. Loudon as well. And then in terms of my own research, I'm the director of the Latino Alcohol and Health Disparities Research Center. The name sort of suggests some of the key elements that we are interested in alcohol use disorder, and we are particularly interested in cultural factors that contributed to health disparities of alcohol use disorders among Hispanics. What's not immediately evident in the title is that we are interested in applying self-determination theory as a way of understanding motivation to change behavior. And then we are also interested in applying and evaluating interventions that are based on positive psychology. And what else? And so I think that those are the things that I would emphasize. Oh, also, we are more interested in why people make changes in their drinking and how they sustain those changes rather than alcohol use disorders per se. And so that's what I can tell you about my research, the clinical program. If you're interested in finding out more details about the clinical program and sort of whether it's a good fit for you, I'm happy to meet individually. I would encourage you to check out the website, but even then you may have some questions, given that we do kind of provide 3 roadmaps, the core being that PhD preparation curriculum. So thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Field. That's great. Next up, one of our friends and colleagues, Dr. Reed, has been blogging a bit about getting into graduate school and things about applying and that kind of thing. So we asked her to give a brief talk about doing so at UTEP. Dr. Reed?
Yeah, so you've already heard from me. And Dr. Serafine gave some really great information. I'm including a couple links in the chat, and I know Dr. Ivanova has been providing you some for the different programs in the chat, so feel free to check out the chat. We have a pretty good flyer for applying to graduate school at UTEP specifically. That's that first link there. It has the UTEP information, and it gives you the major deadline and all of the things that you need to apply. And so I think that that's really important for you to check out, but things to note is that your application is due December 1st. And you need to submit the application with your fee, and then your transcripts, a personal statement, and then 3 letters of recommendation. So those are the things that you really need to be submitting. As Dr. Cooper mentioned, I've been writing blogs because I've gotten a lot of students asking me questions about how to apply to grad school. So I've linked a couple of the really important ones that I think might be helpful for you in the chat. The first one is whether or not you should go to graduate school. And I think that that's a really important place to start. And hopefully those of you on this call feel like, oh, I already know that I want to go. But please take a read of that one and answer the questions and figure it out, because at the very least, it will help you focus on where you're applying and figure out what statements you're going to write and other things like that. The next thing is how to apply to graduate school, and that'll walk you through a bunch of the different steps and the things that you need. And here you want to make sure that you are figuring out what programs you're interested in. And like you are all here, so hopefully UTEP is a program of interest to you. I encourage you to reach out to the people that you're interested in working with and see if they're accepting students and what type of research that they're doing and how that fits with you. There's information about how to reach out to people in that blog, and encouraging you to do that. Like I said, I see a lot of you in here that have already reached out to me, so that's great. But I encourage those of you who have not reached out to a potential mentor to do so. There's some tips about how to to get letters of recommendation and who to have write them, because you're going to need 3 of them. And then hopefully you get to the point where you might need to interview and pick a program. And one of the more recent blog posts is on that as well. So there's a bunch of different things here that should be helpful to you, especially the first 3 will be helpful right now. And then the 4th one will be helpful in the future. So good luck.
Dr. Reed, that was awesome and succinct again, because we're keeping trains moving here on this Zoom call. So I appreciate that so much. Now, we've asked 3 of our most talented current graduate students, representing 3 of our different concentrations and kind of different years within their field of study, to just briefly share a benefit or 2 or something about UTEP that they would want to share with you. So let me first ask Jacqueline Lechuga to share a little bit briefly about a benefit or 2 that you've noted from UTEP or in your training here.
Hello everyone, again, my name is Jacqueline Lechuga. I'm a 5th year PhD student in the social cultural area here at UTEP. I think one of the big advantages of UTEP would be the department itself. Faculty is really nice, which is definitely something you want in a program. You want to be in a program where the environment is going to be an environment where you actually can succeed. And I've been here for about 8 years, not in the graduate program, don't freak out, please. But as an undergraduate and a graduate student combined, I've been here about 8 years, and I've never had any problems with faculty. Even with faculty that maybe are not working here at UTEP, everyone has been always super nice. So we do have a really nice pool of faculty members that are always there to help students succeed. So again, like I said, that's a really good environment to be working on, especially when a lot of like personal things might happen. They're always willing to work with you and cooperate with whatever your situation is and things like that. So I would say that's the biggest benefit. The other one I would mention is stats. I do like that UTEP or our program has a focus on statistics. It's a really nice skill to have. You will definitely find a job just by having some skills in statistics. And then the third one would be the population that we have here. Depending on what your research interest is, the population that we have here might be perfect for your research. So for example, if you're doing bilingualism, then that's definitely a perfect area to do this kind of work. If you're doing work in culture, then it's also a really nice pool of people to study.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Those are some great benefits to highlight. And let me ask from our legal psychology concentration, Anya, to share a little bit with you.
Hi, yes, so as everyone has already said, thanks so much for being at this informational session. I'm Anya, I'm from the legal psychology area, as Dr. Cooper mentioned. I'm a 3rd year student at UTEP. And as many of you are zooming in from, I came here from California, so shout out to California. One of my absolute favorite kind of advantages of being here at UTEP, and specifically in the legal program, but also in all other areas, is, as others have mentioned, is the community collaboration atmosphere that we have. So it's really nice that we get to work with a lot of community partners. We get, as graduate students, we have wonderful experience working with these partners who are open to letting us into their doors and working on research with their kind of populations. In our lab, I work with Dr. April Thomas, and so we work very closely with the juvenile probation department, and it has been just amazing to be able to come in there and collaborate with them and kind of get a feel for what they're looking for from us and how we can best help them. I think that's a great experience. The other really big thing I've noticed is how collaborative the atmosphere is with faculty and other graduate students here. I have not met anyone with whom I've had awful interactions. I've loved working with everybody so far that I've had a chance to work with, which is the most faculty. And I feel like everyone has been incredibly encouraging. And to me as a graduate student coming in here, and also to other fellow graduate students that I've met, I've had great opportunities to collaborate on papers with other faculty members, on projects. So that's been really nice to see. And with other graduate students, it's been great because I've been able to build connections with people who I'm here for 5 years with. And I think that makes graduate school a much more smooth experience, I would say, and a much more enjoyable experience. So there's definitely a lot of room for forming social connections, forming professional collaborations, and working with the community here.
Thank you so much, Anya. And to round things out before we get to our Q&A, one more current student from the health area, Mickey Garcia.
Hi, my name's Mickey Garcia, and I'm a first-year PhD student in the health psychology program. And one thing I definitely want to mention is what Jackie said about the UTEP Psychology department is how friendly and engaging our professors are, not only with the students that they mentor, but the undergraduate students that they teach. You know, I've experienced this myself as I was an undergrad at UTEP, and from many other, you know, friends and students too, and how engaging all of our professors are compared to many of the other professors on campus too. Ours is very engaging and very collaborative and extremely friendly. But more generally, I want to mention about UTEP and how it's a Hispanic serving institution. So most everybody at UTEP is a minority. So it's a minority serving institution, and you won't feel marginalized or outcasted if you're also a minority as well. Many of us here are not only minorities, but we're also first generation college students. So if you're also a first generation college students, you can definitely connect with a lot of the students here in the graduate program, as well as, you know, we were first in our families to go to college and get our bachelor's degree, and the first to get our graduate degree as well. So minorities, you can make a lot of connections here, and it's a very friendly atmosphere, very friendly environment and department as well. I mean, I'm biased. I went here for my undergrad and then I'm here for my grad too, so I love it.
Thank you, Mickey. All good points from all of our current students. And as anyone on the call can see, our students do an even better job showcasing this program than anyone else, because they're pretty much the best thing about the department, I would say. I'm a little biased. But we have met our goal to leave a good 20 minutes for questions and answers. So feel free to raise your hand and go ahead and let me call on folks so that you can ask your question, or drop one in the chat. As has been referenced, Dr. Thomas and Dr. Ivanova are here to kind of help us behind the scenes. They would outshine the heck out of all of us, so we didn't let them talk, but they're helping with making sure that if you drop it in the chat, we can answer those questions, or if you just raise your hand and turn on your camera and go, we'll try and get those answered. Don't be shy. Yes, Eugenia.
I have a few quick questions, if I may. The first, so I guess, do I just like barrage you with questions and then get the answers, or do I go one at a time?
Yeah, let's go either way. We'll do the best we can.
Okay. The first one is, I guess, for the bilingualism stuff, do you specifically focus on Spanish, which obviously is the most convenient, or do you work with other languages as well? And then the second one is a more general admissions question. A lot of places really like people to have spotted more than one potential mentor. Like they want, line up your 2, 3, 4 people. And then other places are more like focus on one. So I guess, which one do you prefer? And there was a third one and it's flown out of my head entirely. So I'll leave that for later. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you for that. Let me let Dr. Serafine answer the general admissions question, and then Dr. Potter with the bilingual question. Go ahead, Dr. Serafine, real quick.
Sure. So I think it's totally up to you. I think it's always a smart move to mention at least 2 potential mentors, just in case one of those 2 individuals might not have enough space in their lab. But this is another really great reason to contact faculty ahead of time, because they can answer that question for you before you apply, if they might have space, how many students they might be taking, and that sort of thing. So I recommend writing down at least 2 in the personal statement. But if you talk to somebody and they're enthusiastic about you ahead of time and you want to place your bets and put all your eggs in that basket, that's not a bad strategy either.
I would also say if there's only one person that you want to work with, don't list 2. If there's only one area of research that you're really interested in, then it's better for you to just go with that one person.
And as was mentioned earlier, in all of our concentrations in the doctoral training, we require somebody to work with another mentor, maybe on a conference presentation or a publication or something. So secondary mentorship is a good idea as well in that regard, but not necessarily admission per se or the primary mentor. Dr. Potter on the bilingual question.
Ted, I was going to take that question.
Oh, go for it.
So hi everyone. Hi, Gidia. So the short answer is no. It doesn't have to be about Spanish necessarily. It's just that the vast majority of people who live in El Paso and of our students are Spanish English bilinguals, and that makes it easiest to have this particular language combination. Within that, there is a range of dominance and proficiency. Some people are balanced, some people are English dominant, some people are Spanish dominant. So we have a whole range, and then we have some, I don't believe there's any pure monolinguals in this world, but we also have people who speak mostly English on a daily basis. So with that said, first of all, now in the pandemic, we learned how to do research online. So there's a lot of potential there. And given, so in-person research, if it's a sizable, I know there's a German population here, so basically the answer is not necessarily. But practically, English and Spanish is the easiest thing to do.
Thank you, Dr. Ivanova. Next question. Who else has some questions for us or the current students? I see a question here about undergraduate training, and certainly there are opportunities within most every lab within the department to, as an undergraduate, build one's research experience and prowess. And in that regard, you could look to the website, the faculty pages and emails, find your best fits and reach out to that potential mentor directly through email, and or if you're here locally, of course, on campus or virtually for office hours to discuss opportunities with them. And yes, each lab is kind of different in terms of what their requirements are. Some of us like to have students in the lab for multiple semesters or a GPA or some sort of thought on that, but each one can tell you that.
But I might just quickly clarify that there is no minimum GPA requirement for applying to our program. So anyone with any type of GPA can apply. We don't have a published minimum for the graduate program.
Nor is there, Eugenia, your third question, a GRE threshold that has to be met. We tend to, and Dr. Serafine can back me up on this or kind of edit me, but we tend to like to look at the complete application package from undergraduate training, courses, all sorts of things, the professional or personal statement, the letters of recommendation, the fit with the mentor, among other things. I know I missed, I did it the whole semester last time, but go for it. NIE, how's that?
NIE, yeah, it's great. Thank you. Hi, so I have 2 questions. So I saw on your website, it said that PhD students typically finish between 2.5 and 4.5 years if they enter with a master's. I have a master's in applied linguistics, but I wanted more information on, is it a master's in psychology? And then that goes towards my second question, which is leveling requirements that I noticed on the website that were mentioned in psychology. And is there an extension program at UTEP, or how can we start working on those if we're applying for this fall for next fall?
I'm gonna head over to Dr. Seraphine, our graduate program director. Easy for me to say. I only talk to you daily.
Sure. So the question about if a master's will transfer is definitely going to be dependent case by case. So the master's does have to be empirical in nature. So it can't be a theoretical project that you did. It has to have been an actual experiment of some kind, but we do evaluate those on a case by case basis. If you would like to send us any more information about the master's that you have completed, I'm happy to talk with you about that offline and consult with the other faculty about what might transfer versus what might not. In terms of leveling courses, our sort of general recommendation is not to do those ahead of time. Wait until you find out if you get accepted. And the reason that we say that is because we're trying to save you money. Ultimately, if a student does not get admitted into the program, we don't want them to have spent a bunch of time taking classes that they might not necessarily need if they get into a different program that doesn't require those. And so that's basically our general recommendation there, is to wait. And if you get admitted and need to take those courses, then you can do that usually in the summer or the semester before the program begins. So I hope that answers your questions, but definitely send me an email. I'm happy to work with you and talk more about the specific masters that you did to find out if it might transfer over or not.
Thank you, Dr. Seraphine. Dr. Reed, in the chat, Mariana is asking, what if somebody doesn't have research experience? And I feel like given your blog, as well as being a faculty here, you could kind of address or give some advice there.
Yeah, so that's definitely one that we encourage you to get involved in research, and we encourage you to get involved in research early. I think my biggest discussion of that is actually in the letters of recommendation blog post, which you wouldn't really expect, but that's where it is. Mainly so that you have the experience, but also you have appropriate letter writers and everything like that. So research experience is not necessary. However, it is something that most of us are looking for when we're accepting students. And so that's the type of thing that if you don't have research experience, but you have other skills in other ways that you think would be useful, I would reach out to that advisor and talk to them about what experience you do have. And they can give you some sort of guidance on, is this going to be a good fit for my lab or not? So I've had a lot of that. I get a lot of law student or lawyers who are interested in applying that don't have a psychology background. And so then I have to have a conversation with them. And it's really determined on an individual basis at that point, whether it's someone that I would even consider, or if I would encourage them to do something else in the meantime. So there are opportunities, and I talk a little bit about what to do if you don't get into a graduate program in some of these blog posts. So if you feel like I need to get research experience, I don't have any, and no one's going to accept me or really consider me, there are other opportunities, such as working in research labs and trying to look for some sort of paid position if possible and things like that.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. Dr. Potter, I love your comment in the chat. Will you give voice to that?
Yeah, I want to say that I think a lot of people focus on what is going to get me into graduate school, and that's a really important question. But a PhD and research is something that for some people, they think it's really cool, and then they realize after a few months that it's not what they thought it was. And so I really think of it as the research experience is probably as much for you as it is for the people evaluating your application, to know that you like what you're getting into and that the interest you have is best explored in that way. I think a good example will be sometimes for people that are more interested in counseling or clinical work, they realize that they like working with clients and patients better than they like doing the research part of it. And so I think of it as research experience as sort of your test run, as much as, and that's why programs like ours tend to value it, because we don't want you to start something and then realize that it's not what you thought it was.
Thank you, Dr. Potter. Tiffany, you have your hand up.
Hi, my question is similar to the one about transferring with the master's. I'm specifically interested in the behavioral neuroscience area of concentration. I've been in contact with a current graduate student who's working on their PhD in one of the labs at UTEP, and she started as an undergraduate at UTEP, and so she was telling me that for the coursework, she earned her master's along the way. So she was telling me that she's done about 4 years worth of coursework. So I was just curious, I will be transferring with a master's in psychological research. So a lot of my coursework is very statistics and research methods heavy. So I don't know if you could tell me like if that would have any impact on like maybe how much coursework I'll have to do if I'm just going for the PhD specifically, or do I have to do all of the same coursework?
I can take that one if you want. So
I was about to say, I don't want to
got
call you a Zoom hog, Dr. Seraphine, but it's most appropriate that you field that one.
Sure. So again, it's going to be a case-by-case evaluation. Happy to talk to you about those things before you apply though. So I assume you might be working with Dr. Zavala in Long Beach. And if you are, please do reach out to me. I already mentioned to him to make sure that all of the folks that are in y'all's group have my contact information, but please do reach out. The short answer is that we do often transfer quite a few credits if the courses match. That's going to be, again, case by case. So I can't say for sure they will all transfer, but many of them probably will. So that will probably reduce total time to degree if you're transferring in courses and that sort of thing. And I assume you're probably also doing an empirical master's project, which might also transfer as well. So again, that would speed up the timeline.
Yes, and he did give me your contact information a couple of days ago. We also have, I'm here representing, we have 3 master students in our lab right now. Unfortunately, the other 2 couldn't make it, but they're all considering the program as well.
Awesome.
So you'll get a lot of emails from us very soon.
Please do reach out anytime.
We have a question about letters of recommendation, and it was specific to the clinical master's program. So let me ask Dr. Field, who I know kind of quickly replied in the chat, but maybe you want to expound on that just briefly.
Sure, I guess opinions might vary, and I don't know the details of your situation, but I would say in general, while there is a cutoff for, when that person had experiences with you, that it's probably more relevant. It's probably more important that what they're able to speak to is relevant than it was, 6 months ago, a year ago. Hopefully that's helpful.
So no recommendation letters from like 12 when you were 12 and in middle school, yeah.
And if they have not had any future or further contact with you since then.
I still find those very persuasive. I think I'm in a minority.
I would also like to jump in. I know this is not about the clinical program specifically, but letters of recommendation more generally. I think it's good to have letter writers who can speak to your qualifications and your skills, like Dr. Field was talking about. So if you have that from like an undergraduate professor and you've taken a couple of years off, it's acceptable to go and use them. It's totally fine as long as they can remember you. So Dr. Thomas has a really good recommendation that if you're planning on taking some time off, please reach out to one of your professors ahead of time and maybe stay in contact with them in the meantime, so that you don't really lose that opportunity, because it's better if they can maybe draft something or take some notes initially. I think it's also important to note that if you are taking some time off, especially if you're pursuing something that is furthering your goal of getting into a graduate program, whoever is supervising you in this new adventure should also probably be one of your letter writers. So if you are taking that time off, you will have someone who's newer. And so especially having someone who knows you recently, and then someone from your undergraduate program or a research lab that you worked in a few years prior, that should be a pretty good combination of people.
Thanks, Dr. Reed. Brenda asked in the chat about GRE prep, and she's getting a lot of good answers within the chat. I definitely would suggest there are multiple books or courses online, or even pre-pandemic in person, but the GRE kind of has its own way to it, just like the SAT or ACT earlier. So really thinking through the process of taking it as well as specific studying can be very helpful. Anai?
Yes, this is specific to the bilingualism, language, and cognition concentration. I wanted to know if you could tell us what the recent alumni are doing now. Do most of them have positions in academia or research or else?
Let me see, Dr. Ivanova or Dr. Potter, which one of you wants to field that?
I can try. So I think that the thing with why are we hesitating, me and Dr. Potter, is that we haven't been here for a representative number of years. So I have been here this is my 6th year at UTEP, and Dr. Potter, this is her 1st year at UTEP. And so what I know, there's a variety. There's some that are in academia. So there's one is a postdoc, the other one is a faculty member. That I'm just thinking of specific individuals. There are also people who have gone on to do in other things in other areas of education. Program evaluation, I have to think. I'll be happy to answer that question thoroughly. So I'll drop my email in the chat. But basically, there's a variety of things that people have done after graduating from our concentration.
Yeah, yes, and as Dr. Seraphine's pointing out, in addition to academic placements from all of our concentration, that quantitative certificate and/or the analytic statistical training that we offer can lead to, and has from health and multiple concentrations led to data relevant positions in applied science or academia or any of those. We might have time for one last question. Does anyone have one? Also government jobs, yes, NIH as well. Community organizations, program. You see, everyone's got wonderful answers. Seeing none, please know this. Please reach out to any or all of us by email. That includes all of the faculty you see and don't see here. That includes the current students. I think as everyone indicated, and our students said it best, we pride ourselves at UTEP on accessibility and being a bigger pond than some may think, but quite closely connected, really engaged, and certainly engaged in the process of attracting strong candidates to our program at the graduate level, even at the undergraduate level, as was asked prior. And I know that every single faculty member is eager to hear from potential applicants and to talk with you as needed. And feel free to contact any of us. And I just have to thank you so much for your time, your strong questions. And yes, the deadline December 1 is to enter in the fall of 2022. With that, thank you all again. Thanks for everyone who presented and joined. Thanks to our current students who did a great job as always. Everyone have a beautiful day and a great weekend.